A windowless room inside Tehran's Evin prison. The air is thick. In the center, a 20-year-old man stands before a wooden table. His eyes are blindfolded. The cloth is tied so tight it cuts into his skin. The only sound? The scratching of a fountain pen on cheap paper. This isn't a trial. This is an assembly line. The man behind the table doesn't even look up. He asks just one question. Are you still loyal to your beliefs? The prisoner hesitates. He doesn't know what's waiting just 2 rooms down. 6 nylon ropes hanging from a steel ceiling beam. He doesn't hear the forklift engine idling outside in the courtyard. He thinks this is just another interrogation. He thinks he's going back to his cell. He whispers, "Yes." The judge nods. The pen stops scratching. Next, the entire process took 90 seconds. 20 minutes later, the young man is hanging from the hydraulics of a yellow construction crane, his feet dangling above the dusty courtyard. 5 others hang right beside him. This exact scene was repeated thousands of times in the summer of 1988. Within a few weeks, the Iranian regime systematically murdered between 2,800 and 5,000 political prisoners, erased by a single sheet of paper. The terrifying part? That exact same bureaucratic machine is still running in Iran today, in 2026. To understand how this apparatus was built, we have to look back to July 8th, 1988. Ayatollah Khomeini, the terminally ill supreme leader of the Islamic Republic, issued a fatwa. The entire religious decree was less than 100 words long, but it was absolute. Any imprisoned dissidents who remained steadfast in their beliefs were declared apostates. The punishment was death. With that single document, the regime formed death commissions across 32 cities. Each commission consisted of 3 men, a religious judge, a prosecutor, and an intelligence officer. These 3 men decided life and death at lightning speed. Most of the victims had already served their official prison sentences years prior. They were only still behind bars because the regime refused to release them. Now, they were executed, based on a 90-second conversation. Even Khomeini's own designated successor, Ayatollah Montazeri, was so horrified by the cruelty that he protested. In his memoirs, he wrote that thousands were slaughtered in the very first weeks. This system didn't appear overnight. It goes back to the 1979 revolution. When Khomeini returned from exile in Paris, he promised democracy. That promise lasted just a few weeks. Then, the purging began. In the first 18 months alone, human rights groups reported roughly 30,000 executions. To cement their power, the new regime turned public executions into a horrific piece of street theater. Tehran was undergoing a construction boom back then. Heavy-duty yellow cranes, imported from Western companies, were everywhere. The Revolutionary Guard saw these cranes as the perfect, highly visible gallows. They moved executions to public squares. The prisoners weren't dropped quickly to break their necks. No, they were tied to the cranes and hoisted into the air, agonizingly slowly. They suffocated in full view of commuters, shopkeepers, and children walking to school. Fear became the regime's primary currency. By 1981, after massive anti-regime protests, the execution apparatus went fully industrial. Guards operated the cranes in rotating shifts, like assembly line workers. But the summer of 1988 surpassed everything that came before. Realizing that public hangings caused too much international outrage, the regime moved the assembly line behind the concrete walls of Evin and Gohardash prisons. The logistics were meticulous. Step 1. Guards rounded up prisoners, telling them it was just a routine check before release. Step 2. In front of the commission, the blindfold came off, the single question was asked, and the blindfold went back on. Step 3. If you gave the wrong answer, guards pushed you down a long hallway, straight into the prison's warehouse. Survivors recalled a monotonous sound echoing through the walls day and night. The low hum of forklift engines. The guards tied ropes to the heavy metal forks of industrial forklifts. They lifted 6 people at a time. 30 minutes later, the next group was lined up. At night, refrigerated trucks backed up to the loading docks. The bodies were stacked inside, driven to the Kavaran wasteland outside Tehran, and dumped into mass graves. Bulldozers flattened the dirt. No names, no markers. For months, families were left in the dark. Eventually, parents were summoned to the prison. A guard would hand them a plastic bag. Inside, their child's watch or a ring. His words, "They are dead. Do not ask where they are buried." The infrastructure built in 1979 and perfected in 1988 was never dismantled. The death commissions of the 80s are what we call the revolutionary courts today. The numbers from recent years show the scale. Human rights organizations documented at least 853 executions in Iran in a single 12-month period, the highest number in nearly a decade. The victims, political activists, ethnic minorities, women, and even juvenile offenders. Whenever the regime feels threatened, whether during the 2009 Green Movement or the Woman Life Freedom protests after the death of Gina Mahsa Amini, they use the exact same playbook. The charges are still enmity against God. The trials still last mere minutes, and the tool of choice in Tehran's public squares remains the yellow construction crane. Some of these machines still bear the manufacturer labels of Western companies from the 1970s. The same steel, the same hydraulics, just 4 decades later. For hundreds of thousands of Iranians in exile, these aren't historical statistics. It's the uncle who went into Evin prison in August 1988 and vanished. It's the sister dragged out of a university lecture whose grave was never found, and the regime is still actively trying to erase the evidence. For over 20 years, bulldozers have repeatedly plowed over the Kavaran cemetery, paving it over and planting trees. Anything to ensure that forensic DNA testing of the bones beneath the soil is impossible. The most agonizing part of this story is the absolute lack of justice. The men who sat in those rooms in 1988, sending people to the gallows every 90 seconds, they were rewarded. They rose to the very top of the Islamic Republic. One became the Minister of Justice. Another, Ebrahim Raisi, rose to become the President of Iran, ruling the country until his death in 2024. The killers of yesterday became the lawmakers of today. Khomeini has been dead for decades, but the machine he built is still running. Perfectly timed. As you hear these words, another prisoner is likely being led into a quiet, windowless room in Iran. They are wearing a blindfold. They are standing before 3 men. The question is exactly the same, and the machine is waiting.